That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Enforcement, the directorial debut of Frederik Hviid and Anders Ølholm, a Danish production, of course, that premiered at the Venice Critics Week at the 2020 Venice Film Festival and is being released courtesy of Magnet on March 19th, 2021.
This film is about a police department somewhere in Denmark.
Copenhagen.
Which
is Denmark, yeah.
Where they are experiencing tensions with the local community because of an instance of excessive force with a suspect. So the film opens with a gentleman named
Talib Ben Hassan.
We see him on the news because he was detained by law enforcement and was abused and ends up in a coma. And now there's unrest because apparently this is an ongoing issue, not unlike in the United States. And so then we transfer to a police station where we find an officer named Jens, who's played by
Simon Sears.
I did like him. The police chief explains to him that there's tensions out in these streets because of what's going on with this gentleman who's in a coma. So I need you to ride with this other cop named Mike.
Mike Andersen.
Who's played by
Jacob Lohmann.
Mike is a hothead, and Jens is supposed to kind of keep him on a short leash. So they go out. They're told not to go to a particular neighborhood called Svalgarden, which the promo material describes as a ghetto.
The press notes call it the Svalgarden Ghetto, yes.
But it's basically where a lot of brown people live. They end up getting in there, getting themselves into trouble, and like a night-long sort of battle between Mike and Jens and the community ensues, like war.
Because they're riding because
the gentleman who was in a coma, Talib, dies. So it's on the news that he's just died. And they barely make it out alive. Jens, we presume, may have died, and Amos does make it out alive. The end.
You're cutting out a major chunk of the film.
Well, I'm just trying to...
Sure, okay.
The major chunk I'm cutting out is... So, Amos is clearly racist. I mean, Mike. Sorry. Mike is clearly racist. They make their way into Svalgarden because they're like driving around town and Jens sees like this gray Mercedes and calls in the license plate. And the dispatcher says, oh, it belongs to this person. And that's like a known acquaintance to some like bad guy who lives in that neighborhood. So Mike is all about it. Follows him into the neighborhood, even though he's not supposed to. Stops, interrogates the people in the car inappropriately. Then Jens and Mike have an exchange where it's clear that Jens doesn't necessarily agree with Mike, which makes Mike upset. So the first brown person he sees, which happens to be this teenager named Amos, he pulls him over and violently searches him, which creates a problem because the other neighborhood people see this and they begin to sort of like get riled up. Someone ends up throwing like a milkshake at the cop car, and then this chase ensues. Mike ends up catching the person who ends up being the poor kid he had searched previously, Amos. And then things go downhill from there. The neighborhood just kind of explodes with the news of Talib dying. Yeah. Okay, I want to start with the positive.
Okay.
I think the film looks good.
Sure.
I think the action's well done, and I think the acting is well done.
Sure. Shot by Jacob Møller. Yeah, it does look good.
Okay. What do you think about the positives?
I think that it does. The production value is it's a well done, handsomely shot film. But that's about all that I really thought was positive to say about it. I'm really tired of seeing films that are sympathetic towards law enforcement, where clearly they need to have a stronger stance against this behavior. Because even in the press notes from the co-directors that the intention was never to defend, never to criticize.
Okay, this is my problem. Police brutality, and particularly in the United States, but all over the world, like sort of people who are given power and then how they choose to reign over the others with that power has always been a problem.
Yes.
So, do I think that what happens in this film happens? Yes. But I think when people choose to present it in a way where, like, I had said earlier that to me, if you're the type of person who thinks Eric Garner shouldn't have been selling loose cigarettes and that's how he got into trouble, then I think you will watch this movie and feel for the cops. But if you think that there are cops out there who are unmotivated in their pursuit of people in the community, brown, black people, this is not a fair representation of what I think the reality is. And as such, it creates this weird sort of environment where it's easy for people to sort of dismiss what this movie is. It's like, oh, it's fiction. That doesn't really happen because it's so extreme. Mike is such an extreme racist. And the sort of bad guys, the people in this ghetto, are clearly bad guys. And it just is so over the top. Like spoon feeding us these problems.
It is spoon feeding because then the good guys of the ghetto per se are also cliche, caricatured, even.
If Sia made a movie about the George Floyd murder, I feel like it would be like this, like just tone deaf.
It is a bit tone deaf, and when you are part of the white power structure and you're making a film commenting on that, it needs to be. And we'll go back to their influences because I have some things to say about that, but. It needs to look different than this. Also, it's playing with this notion of good cop versus bad cop because as we come to find, Jens was on hand. He was at the scene where Talib was beaten by his colleagues. Right. And there's a scene that comes up where he finally challenges Mike and Mike says, "You could have stopped me. You were there when the other two beat up Talib and you did nothing then." And Mike is already on edge about Jens because Jens is one of the few that hasn't given a statement in the deposition yet about what happened to Talib because he's this man. It's dealing with this notion of with the blue shield.
Jens seems conflicted with his allegiance to his brethren and to doing what's right for the people he's serving.
Just as Amos is also struggling to, step up and defend in a situation where he has to defend Jens against other young men in the neighborhood, and kind of how stepping up to do the right thing puts you in a compromising position, but policemen never seem to be able to do that.
The film does a good job of creating this frustrating scenario where Jens has several opportunities to sort of stop Mike from going too far and he doesn't. So that was very frustrating to watch, and I feel like I'm sure that happens, right? Because it's like, you know what, I'm not going to get involved because then I'm going to get in trouble, but also you're a witness to wrongdoing, which is also your job to prevent that. So I think the fact that this character Jens seems conflicted, but ultimately does what's right in the sense that he does save Amos, the brown boy who Mike refuses to let go because so when the sort of rioting occurs in the ghetto, Mike and Jens have the good sense to try to dismiss their police garb and put on civilian clothes they stole from a laundry room. They already stick out like a sore thumb because it's these two big white dudes running through this ghetto that is made to seem like only brown people occupy it. But Mike will not let Amos go. And Amos didn't do anything except throw a milkshake at a cop car.
All over spilled milk, yeah.
Literally all over spilled milk. You are willing to die to drag this poor kid around. So at the point where Jens decides that he's going to take Amos back home, he ends up fighting Mike. But it's not necessarily because he believes Mike is wrong for doing this to Amos. It's because Mike is threatening Jens. If you tell internal affairs what you really saw that night, it's curtains for you. Mm-hmm. So I got the sense that Jens was really fighting more for himself than fighting for what was right.
Yes, because he's not able, as I was saying, neither of these police really do the right thing.
No, and the arc for these characters, one, Jens, we don't know this, but we presume he's killed. What sort of gets Jens hemmed up is during this night, after Jens whoops Mike's ass and gets away with Amos, Mike is then because he gets sprayed in the face with mace, he runs out into the courtyard of this ghetto and he gets shot in the arm. Mm-hmm. So now he's a wreck. But he had heard Amos say that I live on the 14th floor of this building over there. So somehow Mike ends up in that building. The idea of space and distance in this movie also confused me because they make it seem like this ghetto is like the size of a city, but then it's also like, it's just a little like complex. It's not like a full ass neighborhood. It's like the projects.
Yeah.
So I was confused.
There's a point where they bring out a map and Amos shows them where they are and where they need to be for their colleagues feel safe enough to go pick them up. And I thought remember 16 Blocks with Bruce Willis and Mos Def.
Oh, I thought to me it felt like it's the size of like the Century City Westfield Mall. I don't know. But Mike makes his way to the building Amos lives in, and then he passes out because he's lost a lot of blood. And then he wakes up and someone has stitched up his wounds, affixed him to an IV.
Got a heparin lock in there and everything.
And when he wakes up, he realizes that a woman, a nurse, has mended him. She gives him food, and then he realizes it's Amos's mom. That was so damn corny.
Yeah, that was way too.
And then she's telling her story about her son and how he's a good kid, but he's just so having a hard time because of the way the world sees him, and he can't do right. And then we think that maybe Mike might see that his racist ass view of an entire group of people might be wrong. We realize that Mike took Amos's phone. So he's standing in Amos's mom's house when she tries to call Amos's phone and sees that Mike has it. So of course she freaks out, like, why do you have my son's phone? Like sort of a fight ensues, like a struggle. He pulls a gun on her, tries to leave. The neighbors get upset, and Mike is able to escape. But then Mike gets mauled by a dog. Mm-hmm. So then another teenage brown kid who lives in the ghetto finds him and doesn't make sense to me, decides to fully help him. Even though he's being pursued by the local bad guy, who's the guy that Jens and Mike originally pulled over. So he chooses to help Mike. This kid steals his dad's car to drive Mike, who's all bloody, to his cop car, which has been stripped because the rioters destroyed it, so that Mike can get a machine gun, mm-hmm. and then come back and I guess save Jens or Amos. I don't know what he thought he was doing. But as he's making his way back to connect with Jens accidentally shoots this other brown kid and kills him. Mm-hmm. This is the end of the movie, so you're thinking okay, what did we learn today, kids? Well, not much, because Mike tells Jens oh, we gotta cover this up. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna put the gun, he wiped the gun clean from Jens, put it in the kid's hand, and then told Jens what to tell, internal affairs. And then as he's doing that, a group of people come up, and we assume they kill Jens because they'd already tried to kill him 30 minutes prior. And then Mike runs away, and then he's met by the people who are supposed to extract him.
At daybreak, yeah.
At daybreak, so Amos is safe. So I would presume that Amos is going to go back to work tomorrow and just be back to the same old bullshit he's been up to.
Sure.
I just didn't like the trajectory of these characters and the way that the dynamic between these two groups is presented, and that you leave the film thinking well, these cops are just doing their job. No.
Yeah, no. I agree. And when you talk about, with this making a statement that it's not to defend or criticize, what I really didn't like was they made a point of justifying why Mike decided to doggedly pursue this vehicle into this jurisdiction, this neighborhood that they were told expressly not to go to on that day, to make a point, to show that, they suspected this criminal was grooming young children for nefarious activities.
When really it's his racism that acts like a magnet towards these people.
But it's just the filmmakers justify it for us by making sure we show that yes, this is very much what this person is doing. In fact, that was at least the second child, probably more that day, that he approached in the neighborhood to round up under his criminal wing. Okay, let me.
You have a couple minutes.
Okay, so one of the pull quotes on the poster compares it to John Carpenter and Walter Hill, which kind of piqued my interest in this film to begin with. And of course, it's making those are comparisons to like Assault on Precinct 13, John Carpenter's original 1976 film, which finally gave me an excuse to go back and watch it. It's one of the only 2 Carpenter films I've never seen. Excellent, beautiful score, and was everything I kind of wanted the energy this film to have. And Walter Hill's The Warriors, which is also a classic of that director's that I favor. But as I was thinking about how you can't really, those are apples and oranges, those are genre films. Even the directors mentioned that besides Hill and Carpenter, they were influenced by Friedkin and Sidney Lumet. And those were directors in a certain period making genre films. And when you're making genre films and dealing with these kind of communities and characters, all of that stuff gets to exist very interestingly and intensely in the subtext, and we are able to glean things from their culture and how they feel and move about in the world in interesting ways. When you remove that and the genre per se and make all of that subtext, it becomes so heavy-handed and over the top. Not that a social issue drama can work. They also reference later influences like Spike Lee and Matthew Kassavitz's Haine. And those films are dealing with a certain type of community, but from the perspective of that community, per se, like Do the Right Thing. So I get that the intention was there, it just doesn't work. This is kind of more along the lines of like Lajlee's Les Miserables from 2018, which also cuts major corners and tell us about a trio of conflicted cops, per se, that end up in this major shootout action sequence in an apartment building in an urban neighborhood. That just doesn't work for me. It is preaching to the choir based on who's probably going to see this film. And again, as you said, I don't think that it really showcases that anybody's learned anything, per se.
What would you give this film?
I would give this film 1.5 out of 5 stars.
Oh.
And also it's important to note that Shorta is the actual title, which is Arabic for police.
I would give it 2 out of 5. I do think it's well done. I just hate the story.
My patience is dwindling with these. Not that I am against watching, it's not an easy occupation, per se, and it's not black and white, per se, but I'm so tired of that. It's so imbalanced how we're seeing these, and all of the other characters, the urban kids in the ghetto are just cardboard cutouts. Mm-hmm. There to serve the narrative of these 2 very problematic policemen that have nothing to say. And I'm also tired of like these wan, passive good guys. Like Jens has absolutely no personality to me.
No, which, I mean, I'm sure there could be an argument for why he's like that, but I think in the context of this story, it wouldn't matter.
I think it's because if you have a personality, it means you have to come out and take a stand, at least for yourself, if not for others.
Yeah. Anything else?
No.
Bye.
Bye.